It began with a passing comment on a crowded train, a few words, a bruised ego, an argument between strangers. But within minutes, on a routine commuter service travelling towards London, Lee Pomeroy would be fighting for his life after a frenzied knife attack that lasted just 25 seconds. And the man responsible would step off the train and disappear. It was Friday the 4th of January 2019, and 51-year-old IT consultant Lee Pomeroy and his 14-year-old son were heading into London to catch the train to Waterloo to spend some quality time together. They boarded the train at London Road train station in Guildford, and the train pulled out of the station at 1:01 p.m. Another man, unknown to them, also boarded the train in Guildford, and what happened next was all captured on CCTV, although quite what was said is disputed. Essentially, as Lee and his son moved down the carriageway, there was some sort of dispute with this other man in the carriage. The other man made some comments to Lee about him blocking the carriage, something pretty innocuous like ignorance is bliss, and then walked off. But Lee didn't want to let it go, and he followed the man into the next carriage, where their dispute got more heated, with Lee saying to him something like, "Please, I want you to apologise to me, because you have humiliated me in front of my child." The other man was getting seriously rattled, saying stuff like, touch me, I dare you. You will see what happens at the next station." The situation was rapidly spiralling out of control. The other man made a call on his mobile where he was heard saying, "I'm going to kill this man." And then, just 5 minutes after the three had boarded the train, the other man pulled a knife from his pocket and plunged it into Lee's neck. In a frenzied attack, he stabbed Lee 18 times, and it was all over in 25 seconds. Lee then staggered away from the altercation and collapsed into a seat, panting heavily. Lee's wife Svetlana later told what happened next, saying that her son didn't actually witness the attack, but he was quickly on the scene. She said, "He found his dad sitting and holding his head. He noticed his eye was very badly injured, and he asked him what had happened. Lee replied, 'Oh, he punched me.' Then Lee got up, moved towards the doors, and fell on the floor. The blood was pouring out of his neck, bubbling, like in a horror film." Her son said, "Don't move, Daddy." Our son had to call the ambulance because he was alone with his dad. He tried to keep Lee on the floor and asked him not to move too much, hoping he wouldn't lose any more blood. As Lee lay on the floor, there was so much blood. Lee managed to stagger from the train at the next stop, Horsley Station, where train staff and policemen tried to help. Police and paramedics did all they could to save Lee, and an air ambulance arrived. But despite all their efforts, tragically, Lee was declared dead by paramedics at Horsley Station at 1:15 p.m. It was just one day before his 52nd birthday. The pathologist's report showed that Lee had died from just one of the 18 stab wounds inflicted on him. He said the 6-centimetre deep wound to the neck had cut the jugular vein, but with very prompt treatment you could have reasonably expected him to recover from the other 17 wounds. So it was just that one stab wound out of 18 which had killed Lee. Lee's devastated family paid tribute to him in a statement, saying, "Lee would have had his birthday today, but he did not get to see his presents. He was an honest, bright person who loved music very much. He knew his history and art, and he was a Bachelor of Science in Maths. He was a devoted family man and did everything for his family. He was an honourable man and would always help somebody who was in trouble. He was a loving husband and father. He will be deeply missed by all of his family." Let's go back to the investigation and the scene of the crime. After the attack on Lee, his killer picked up his possessions, including a pair of sunglasses and a hat, which had fallen off during the altercation, and left the train at the next stop, which was Clandon Station. And Clandon proved to be the key to the investigation. Investigators were able to look at the CCTV from the train, so they knew the man they were looking for. They just had to find him, of course. And a witness quickly came forward who said they saw the suspect sweating profusely and slightly distressed, climbing over a fence that leads to woodland in West Clandon. The man told her he'd been in an accident, and afterwards she found a hat with blood on the inside in a field nearby, and this man's coat was later recovered in the woodland, along with a pair of glasses that were found in the field. And the key information came from CCTV in Clarendon, which captured the man being picked up in a blue Vauxhall Corsa, which was traced to a local 28-year-old woman, Chelsea Mitchell, who lived just 15 miles or so away from Clarendon. At 5:52 a.m. the next morning, armed police knocked on Chelsea Mitchell's door. One officer was holding a taser and another had an assault rifle. Chelsea Mitchell answered the door and was asked to come outside, and an officer then spotted a man present in the property, who was later identified as 36-year-old Darren Penseal, and told him to turn around, put his hands on his head, and back out of the front door. Penseal asked, "What's this about?" before he was handcuffed and taken away. From the CCTV from the train, the police were certain they had, in Penseal, the man responsible for the murder. Looking into his background, detectives found quite a complex picture of violence and mental health challenges. 36-year-old Penseal was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic, and he'd met his partner, 28-year-old Chelsea Mitchell, on a dating website. She opened up to detectives. She told them a bit more about their lives, especially how the previous summer their son Romeo was stillborn, which she said had a devastating effect on both of them. Penseal had supported her when she was struck with depression after the stillbirth, which meant that she was unable to get out of bed, and she still had to care for her young daughter, who called Penseal Daddy. And even on the day of the attack, it turned out that Penseal carried a 20-week ultrasound scan of Romeo in his wallet. And Penseal just wasn't comfortable in crowded situations like shops, supermarkets, trains, hospitals, or railway stations. Chelsea told the police how her partner, who she called Jimmy, did not cope well with train journeys in particular, and he would panic. When he did so, 9 times out of 10, he would call Chelsea, as it seemed he did on the last fateful trip. But Chelsea was usually able to calm him down, and if his panic levels meant he had to get off the train, she would collect him and either take him home or to another quieter train station. She also managed his panic in other parts of their lives, such as shopping at supermarkets. To save Penseal going to a busy supermarket, Chelsea would go instead and then communicate with her partner by sending images via WhatsApp to check that she was buying the stuff that he wanted. And although Chelsea told detectives he'd never been violent towards her, Penseal did have quite a track record of violence, including using a knife in 2010 when he stabbed his 24-year-old housemate, an argument about nothing, and the housemate received life-threatening injuries. For this offence, Penseal admitted a charge of wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, for which he was sentenced to 54 months in prison. It transpired that after the killing, after leaving the train in Clarendon, as the police desperately searched for Penseal, he'd called his partner Chelsea to pick him up and take him to their Farnham home, and whilst there he got rid of the clothes he'd been wearing and he took a shower. Penseal then suggested to Chelsea they visit the local beauty spot Frensham Ponds to let off lanterns in memory of Romeo. This was a place they would often go for peace and to gather their thoughts. Just picture the contrast between the horror of Lee's family, the police search, the frenzy of the search, and then the couple in the quieter Frensham Ponds letting off their lanterns. After this, the couple headed south to the Sussex coast and Bognor Regis, where Penseal had a flat. Whilst there, it all seemed remarkably normal, with Chelsea giving her daughter dinner and they watched EastEnders. But Penseal was captured on CCTV in a supermarket in nearby Chichester, buying hair clippers and razors in an attempt to change his appearance. At about 9:30 p.m, he called his ex-partner, who is the mum of his son. He said, "I've done something bad today, and you'll see it in the news." He then sent her a text saying, "I'm sorry, I love you both." Later that night, Penseal and Chelsea returned to her flat in Farnham, and as we know, this is where they were arrested from the following morning. It was only when they got back home and had put Chelsea's daughter to bed that Chelsea told police she then realised what her boyfriend has done, as it was only now that she looked at the news on her phone. It is, of course, almost impossible for us to believe this, as her partner was covered in blood after the attack. Add to that Chelsea saw Pencil buying tools to change his appearance, and a later examination of their phones showed they'd taken photographs of his injuries whilst at Frensham Ponds. And more than this, later phone examinations showed Chelsea looking for any evidence of CCTV at Clarendon Station. So to say that her story has serious holes in it is a bit of an understatement. As well as the conviction we've heard about, Pencil had 14 previous convictions for 19 different offences over a 19-year period, including possession of offensive weapons, violence and dishonesty. And Chelsea Mitchell too, she was no stranger to a police station, with 7 previous convictions for 10 different offences, including assault, threatening behaviour, drunken disorderly behaviour and battery. During police interviews, Pencil didn't answer any of the questions put to him, providing no explanation as to why he had unleashed such a savage attack on Lee Pomeroy. At his trial, 36-year-old Pencil denied murdering Lee Pomeroy on the 4th of January 2019. His lawyer told the Old Bailey he did not deny stabbing Lee, but said it was in self-defence. Chelsea Mitchell stood accused of assisting an offender after collecting Pencil from Clarendon and taking him back to her home in Farnham. Pencil didn't take to the stand and speak in his defence, leaving Chelsea to talk about the pair's relationships and their actions around the time of the killing. The jury at the Old Bailey weren't impressed by what they had heard, and they found Pencil guilty of murder and Mitchell of assisting an offender. The judge sentenced Pencil to life in prison with a minimum term of 28 years, telling him, "The simple fact is you picked on the wrong man. He stood up for himself, but when he took that decision, he didn't know about your violent history. He didn't know you'd been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He didn't know you'd not been taking your antipsychotic medication. He gave as good as he got until you pulled out that lethal weapon." She also said, "Anyone who watches the breathtakingly shocking CCTV footage would struggle to understand how you could have ever claimed to have acted in self-defence against that unarmed man. You will spend the best years of the life left to you in prison, away from your children and those you love." Once Pencil was in the cells, the judge turned to Chelsea Mitchell, telling her that she was convinced that she knew just what had happened as soon as Pencil got in the car. "I'm sure you were acting under misguided loyalty," she said, "but none of that amounts to any form of excuse." For this crime, Chelsea Mitchell was sent to prison for 28 months. The court heard a terribly moving victim impact statement from Lee's widow, Svetlana, who described his murder as a senseless loss of life, which had been made much worse because it was witnessed by their son. She said, "I miss my husband every day, and to compound the situation, his son was with his father when he died. I've lost my friend, my soulmate and my guide. Lee loved life, and it's been cruelly cut short." Talking about the effect of this terrible incident on her son, Svetlana said, "He's frightened to be alone at night. He is terrified of loss and of losing me. He's returned to school, but he seems to have lost perspective." And as we finish today, our thoughts have to be with Lee's family as they still try to continue to come to terms with their terrible loss. A violent death, as you know, is so hard to understand, but I think this is particularly difficult as there is just so much CCTV showing Lee's last moments. And I was so moved by Lee's wife Svetlana's account of how her son managed in the days following his dad's death. She said, "Our son found it easier to grieve with his beloved beagle, Benji. He spent 2 weeks in bed with his dog. That really helped him to overcome the loss." Thank you so much for watching this video today. Please do like and subscribe to keep me producing more free content for you. And while you're here, why not watch another video like the one that's currently on the screen? Until next time, I've been Adam Lloyd.